Good day and welcome to Kingston Coffee and Conversation. I'm your host, Bob Fennessy, and over the next several weeks I'll be coming to you with various people and different issues that are happening in and around Kingston. I hope this will be a point of interest for you and be entertaining at the same time, and you'll learn something about me, about my guests, and about the towns. So my first guest this week is none other than our town planner from Kingston, Tom Bott. Welcome, Tom, to my show, Coffee and Conversation. I have a cup of coffee there for you, and feel free to.
Very nice. So usually it's J.C. Monahan who interviews me on these things. She's not actually here today.
This is a grade up.
Okay.
Okay, so we've taken a step up.
It's nice to know I made it to the show.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
So, Tom, the first thing when I met you a few years ago, first thing I noticed was an accent. It wasn't a Boston accent. It was from somewhere, some other planet, I don't know. So where do you hail from?
Well, my father was in the Army. So I was born north of Chicago in the Great Lakes Naval Training Center. Lived two places in Kansas, Virginia, Germany, Massachusetts, Florida, Rhode Island. Spent a year in Dallas, went to grad school at Georgia Tech. So my accent's from everywhere.
So it's a little piece of each section of the country. Yeah, it's very unique anyway. So you're the town planner for the town of Kingston.
Yes, sir.
A lot of people say, what is a town planner? What does a town planner do? What's the responsibilities? What is even the words of a town planner? You don't plan towns. So what is it that you do?
Well, the planner works under the policy direction of the town administrator, or the policy direction of the planning board and the administrative direction of the town administrator, you. So I assist the planning board in reviewing developments that come online, site plans, subdivisions, special permits, grocery stores, residential subdivisions, and things like that. In addition, typically in a larger shop, because we're a one planner town in Kingston, there's a current planning and a long-range planning office. And when I was in Atlanta working for the city of Marietta, I was the long-range planner. So in addition to what comes in across the door, across the threshold, we also look at long-term implications, which we'll be doing in earnest again with the kickoff of the master plan, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So we do a long-range perspective, the what-if analysis, and we look at the current proposals for things coming in. And then in addition, the job has evolved over time with other tasks, such as the green energy stuff that we've been very engaged in here for the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I'll get into that a little later, but sticking with the term town planner, where does that come from?
Well, I have a master's of city planning from Georgia Tech. And so with that, it's multidisciplinary. They look at land use, they look at economics, they look at real estate, they look at soils, they look at land development. So it's a multidisciplinary master's degree. The people who come into it come from architecture, engineering, social sciences. I was a political science major as an undergrad.
So what's the biggest project that you worked on in the town of Kingston?
I would have to say it's the 40R project that is yet to be built. It was about 2.5 years in the making, getting the zoning in place and things like that, and then the initial site plan application. So that was a 2.5 year process to sort of look at all the implications of traffic, of transportation, of water, of sewer, of land use. It was very comprehensive. We've got a 96-page design guidelines for 40R development. In addition to the zoning. There were a lot of working parts, a lot of moving parts, a lot of different agencies to deal with.
And what's the most, the hardest part of your job?
Just time management, just trying to take care of the things that have to be done. There are some things that statutorily you have so many days to get done, so those clearly take a precedent. When I first got here, I talked to members of the planning board and I asked them to show me their town and talk about things they liked and didn't they like. One of the things that just about everyone showed me was Percy's restaurant on Main Street. And they said that happened because somebody didn't hold a meeting in time. It was a constructive approval. They said, don't let that happen again.
Okay.
So there have been no constructive approvals under my watch.
Okay, good. And had you been a town planner somewhere else?
Yes, I went to school for that. My first job out of school was working for the Office of Historic Preservation in Atlanta for the state. And then I was the urban planner for Marietta, Georgia, represented in Congress at that time by Bob Barr and Newt Gingrich. It was a very interesting environment, much different, as you can imagine, from up here.
Yeah, and you mentioned historic. you've taken an interest in a historic building in town, the Adams Center.
Yes.
And that's been a renovated library now, is being used for functions and talks and different events. So tell me about your interest there and when you first came here, how you were located in that building.
Well, I started off in the old town hall in a closet, a bona fide closet. And so the story is, well, I came out of the closet to go to the Adams building. At the time when I was in the townhouse, if I had to have a meeting with someone or roll out a set of plans, I had to walk across the street to the Font School to have room for another person and a set of plans. So we built out the basement of the Adams Library for my office and the secretary's office. And I was there for, I think, 4 years or so. And just loved the building. It's a fabulous building. And so when the Frederick C. Adams Heritage Center Development Committee was created, I asked to be included as an ex officio member. And have been working on that project, well, since its inception in '98. And now my unofficial title is Adams Building Lackey.
That's right.
Where something happens, something goes on, I'm sort of the person who gets called for whether it's an alarm going off in the middle of the night, or how do we get these particular punch list items sorted out. It's been very rewarding. I love the building in its previous state, and of course everyone, I think, loves the building now. It's fabulous.
If the Kingston residents or even neighboring residents haven't seen the building, you ought to take a walk down there and go in on the days that they're open. It's a beautiful, historically renovated building on the inside. So you also touched upon your work in the energy area for the town. And the town is a green community. Why don't you explain what that means and how we got to that level?
Well, in 2010, the first year of the program, the town was a charter member of the Green Communities. But it's not, you just don't sign up online and that happens. You have to develop zoning, you have to develop a building permit, building code for that. You have to have a policy for energy efficiency vehicles. You have to have a program to try to reduce your energy use by 20 years over 5 years. And
20% over
20% over 5 years. Last year we were at 24%. This year we're at about 17 or so, and that's largely a product of the weather. We had a great year. We've done a lot of energy changes, a lot of energy upgrades that I'll talk about some of those. But you had to have those 5 components to get that done. And the toughest part was adopting the building code, the stretch code. And the stretch code basically made buildings more energy efficient when you built them. And there were some concerns about that. I worked with the building inspector to make sure we had some examples that were accurate to what might happen in the town of Kingston, as far as what sort of utilities you might put in a building, what sort of return you get on that. And so since 2010, we have been a green community, and I think the town has benefited substantially from it. From the grants that we've done, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but through the green community grants, we've had $468,000 in grants, $179,000 in utility incentives that have resulted in about $145,000 in energy savings every year. So it's
That's substantial.
It is.
It is substantial to the taxpayers of the town.
And it's every year.
And not only that, it's showing that the town is a good neighbor to the Commonwealth and to the world. Obviously, we reduced our carbon footprint by making these changes, and also save the money on the tax rate.
Yeah, and while I have no objection to utilities, but it's nice to not send them money and use it for programs internally as well. And that's what it's allowed us to do, is to send less to utilities, save more on these things, and use other people's money to create those things like the boilers at the elementary school. And our next big project that we're looking at doing is the rooftop units at Kingston Elementary School. That is the subject of a vote at the election to repurpose some of the money left over from the senior center. I don't want to get into the technicalities of it, but essentially without the money that we have on hand, we can't move forward with the project to replace these 20-year-old units on the elementary school. We've got a grant in for it as well, $250,000 grant. $200,000 of that is for the green energy component. So if we get the grant, We'll have that money. We'll have some utility incentives as well, in addition to the money that the town is providing. But without a positive vote on repurposing that money, then we've got a real problem, because these units are failing every day, and chances are they're not going to make it through another winter. We're surprised, frankly, they made it through this winter.
And failing, and I would assume that they're very energy inefficient right
Correct.
now. I looked at them, and there was rust and openings and all kinds of issues, water leaks. And
yeah, the energy savings payback on this project will be 5.8 years is projected.
So it's almost, I hate to use the term no-brainer, but it's almost a no-brainer that they need to be replaced in order to maintain energy efficiency throughout the town.
Well, and
to give warmth to the students that are there.
The last thing that Principal Protosiak, who is a fabulous administrator, we've worked a lot on a lot of projects here, is to send a note home to parents to say, please send a parka to your child for math class.
Yeah.
Because there's no heat in the building.
It's cold. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been quite an adventure, and frankly, not just the town of Kingston, but a lot of towns don't do a great job at maintaining the buildings that they have. We do a good job building things, but that issue of maintaining things is always an issue for municipalities.
Yeah. So I find it fascinating, the amount of work that goes into looking at energy efficiency for the town. And I know you do too. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what other projects were done and what's on the horizon?
Well, the initial project and the initial grant was at Kingston Elementary School. It was to recommission the energy management system. The school was built originally and then had a couple different additions to it. So the various energy systems that were included weren't fully integrated with a system. Now they put a system in, but it wasn't quite working with each other. So we spent $100,000 in the first year on that project, $98,000 and change. We'll call it 100. And the payback on that, the energy savings, that was a year. So spending that money, we got that money back in energy savings within a year. In addition, we put a couple of boilers in Kingston Elementary School. The most recent project that is probably the most vocal or the most visible project are the new LED parking lot lights. They were put in at Kingston Elementary School, Kingston Intermediate School, the Senior Center, which we funded actually through some of our own funds, not grant funded, and the townhouse. And these LED lights save money because they're more efficient lights, but they also burn at a lower intensity. They have a motion sensor on it, so when you approach them, they brighten up. So if you're leaving the building at night or coming in after dark, the lights sort of come on and to welcome you as you drive into the property. They flash as you go along, and it's kind of fun.
It really is. I remember the first night that I stayed working late and came out and walked to my car, and the lights were coming on bright, one by one, as I drove out of the parking lot. So it is, and it's a great way to save energy, because when the lot is not being used, why have the lights as bright as they are generally? They can be dimmed down to a low level, still provide security, and then come on when we need them.
That's terrific. And I'd like to say that I planned to have this motion sensor, but I didn't know that was a feature.
Really?
So when it turned out, I sent an email out to everybody in town and said, we have these new lights and they brighten up. Don't be alarmed, just walk to the light.
And they did.
They did.
Okay, so what else is on the horizon in the energy efficiency area?
Well, at town meeting last year, we approved some funding for an ESCO, Energy Service Contract Company. And what we have done so far is we've looked at particular buildings. The ESCO will allow us to take a comprehensive look at all the buildings and determine what our next steps are. We're starting from this initial list of 2010, and there was plenty on that list, but it was specific to a handful of buildings. So with the ESCO, we will do a look at all of the buildings and sort of come up with a comprehensive plan that we can look at dealing with all energy upgrades in all these buildings. On the grant, in addition to the rooftop units, are a couple of smaller projects that I squeezed in under the $250,000. In the event they don't fund the rooftop units, I wanted to net something out of the grant. So we're looking at some upgrades at Kingston Intermediate School as well. Not quite as sexy as rooftop units, it's more like controls and lighting fixtures and things like that.
Okay, and I know we just went out to bid on a solar
Correct.
Issue, so why don't you talk about that a little bit?
We did an RFP for solar on the landfill. On the Cap landfill, as you know, we have a wind turbine there, and the proposal is to put solar arrays on the landfill around that. We've gone out a couple times. The first time we went out, Borrego Company gave us a terrific bid that they couldn't pull the trigger on. We went out to bid a second time, and none of the particular applications were deemed advantageous to the town. So we went out and bid a third time. We've gotten those results back in. Unfortunately, we had one bidder. Hopefully it's a good bid. We're taking a look at it. We've contacted them. They're coming in on a week from Tuesday to meet with the Green Energy Committee and present their proposal to us. And if it's a terrific proposal, we may opt for it. It's the selectman's call, or we may send it back out to bid one more time.
And this would be the first solar array in Kingston for a municipal.
Correct. We get a lot of calls about putting them on the roofs of buildings, and that's something you and I have talked about, and something we need to sort of make some decisions on. But when you consider this winter we had this winter, not that we expect to see a lot of those, it'd be interesting to know how snow removal works on a roof that's covered with solar panels.
Well, Trackle Pond treatment plant has solar panels on it.
They do.
And so we can always find out how they managed.
Well, on a sloped roof,
obviously there's no.
Yeah, on a sloped roof, it makes a lot more sense. But on a flat, and that's the sweet spot where you've got a large flat roof. You've got a lot of surface area there you're not using that you can put the panels on. And typically at a school or something that there's no trees shading it, so it's a terrific environment for that.
And you're right. We went through that situation when we were trying to remove the snow off the roofs for fear of any kind of damage or collapse. And I don't know how you would do that around solar panels.
Nor do I.
Whether there's and maybe that's a developing technology right now.
That's one of those things we've got to consider when we're considering the merits of putting panels on the roof. I would love it if roofs were made of solar panels rather than shingle roofs you just used. And there are that's out there. They still need some improvement in their efficiency and things like that.
So I'm sure that people find that fascinating as we do. Now, you also mentioned earlier a master plan. And again, that's, I think, another document or another process that a lot of people don't understand what that means. Is it a master plan of the world or the town? Or why don't you explain what a master plan is and where we are in that stage?
Well, the master plan is a policy guideline for the town to follow, and it has multiple elements. There's land use, there's housing, there's economic development, historic preservation, recreation, open space, transportation, and I'm sure I'm missing one. I'm no Rick Perry, I can't remember all these things. So that is a policy guideline. When you look at a comprehensive look at the entire town and look at what these issues are, so your first is identifying the existing conditions and then looking at opportunities to implement things that you want to improve. So there's policies, there's goals, there's actions that you take. Some of those actions may be rewriting zoning bylaws for better economic development, for better protection of resources and things like that. So as an upshot of the master plan, we'll look at that implementation schedule as to what we want to change in town and what we want to keep the same as well. The master plan, we hired a consultant. The kickoff meeting is May 11th. We have a master plan committee that's going to be working with the planning board. In the process, it is going to take about 18 months. We've got a minimum of 8 public meetings, including 3 workshop type meetings where people will come in and be hands-on with what we're looking at doing in town, including a design charrette to look at how things might look, how things might be designed. And then the upshot of that is we'll take those recommendations and look at implementing them through policy changes in the town.
I believe the award letter is going out today.
That is excellent.
For the master plan, so that's a good thing. So I had mentioned earlier when I started the show that you find things that are interesting and entertaining and shift away from the town government for a little bit. And there's something interesting about you and your hobbies, or at least one hobby that I'm aware of, and that is your work in Plymouth with the Mayflower 2. And why don't you tell the viewers about that? Well,
it's sort of a hobby, I guess. It's a volunteer thing. I do a couple of volunteer things. I work at our local food pantry, work with the overnight shelter for the homeless. I'm on the Plymouth Schools Music Association as a board member. That's why I left our town meeting. Had to go to Plymouth town meeting to talk about our band uniforms. But my most fun volunteer gig is probably working on the Mayflower. In 2007, on the 50th anniversary of the Mayflower's arrival here in Plymouth, Mayflower 2's arrival, they had a call for a crew. They said, we have 16 spaces on the crew, come out and try out to be on the crew of the Mayflower. So about 60 people showed up for those 16 spots, and the captain announced, well, we have 12 spots on the crew. So they gave 4 away between the announcement. One was a fundraiser sort of thing. So I tried out for the crew. The first thing you had to do was climb the rigging up the shroud, into the bowl, and down the other shroud. The shrouds are the little ladders that go up the top. The bowl is what pirate aficionados would call the crow's nest, but it's a working bowl. So that was the first cut. Anybody who couldn't make that was gone, and one person couldn't make that climb. So the captain had the captain had some very difficult choices to make. How do I cut these down to 12 people? At the end of the day, after 10 weeks of training, I had a seat on the crew as crew member number 13 out of the 12. I was the first alternate. If someone couldn't sail on the crew, I would be that person who would be on the crew for the 50th anniversary sail. So you start looking around. Well, do I want to push somebody off the rigging, and so I can be that guy? I call myself the Ann Foster Golden of the Mayflower. Ann Foster Golden was the runner-up to Miss America in 1947 when Lee Merriweather won. You and I would know that. Some people.
Yeah, I don't know.
But so I was the first runner-up, but I'm still involved in the crew. I've been on several of the tows. We take the ship to Fairhaven for dry dock. Right now the ship is in Mystic for extensive work being done in anticipation of the 400th anniversary in Plymouth. The captain, new captain, Whit Perry, recently emailed me and said, hey, are you available to help us bring the ship back? So chances are I'll be on the ship for a couple days as we tow the ship back into Plymouth.
So it gets towed back, it doesn't sail?
It doesn't sail. Sailing this ship, because it's built in England, the Coast Guard doesn't regulate the ship, but Congress actually wrote specifics for the ship. It has to go out in so much winds, this, not more wind than this, not less wind than that. When it has passengers on it, they have to send a second ship out with empty seats on it in case they have to evacuate the ship. And it costs a tugboat as well. So it costs 60 grand to take the Mayflower out, which is why it doesn't go out a lot. So we'll be under tow on the way back. The Jaguar, our towboat, it's been our tow ship for years, does a terrific job. And we'll be on the water for a couple days, and then we'll come back.
So it's open to the public?
The ship is open to the public. It's part of Plymouth Plantation. You can get a ticket for Plymouth Plantation. You can get one for the Mayflower. You can get an annual pass as well to be members of the plantation. And it's been a really terrific.
Well, if it ever goes out again and you're looking for a passenger, just keep me in mind.
All righty.
I'd like to take that trip. So I want to thank you for coming in and being my first guest on the show. And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in and watching. And until our next cup of coffee,
All right.
I'll say good day, and we'll see you again.